Good afternoon, everyone. This is the October 26, 2023 Zoning Board of Adjustment regular meeting. My name is Matt Perry, and I'm chair of the board. I will now call this meeting to order and ask the clerk to call the roll so that we may verify the presence of quorum.
Board Member Callahan is absent. Grants Korsch.
Present.
Hutchins.
Yep.
Ingram.
Here.
Johannesson is absent. Perry.
Here.
Softly is absent. Smikarova.
Here.
Wang is absent. We have 5 members present.
So we do have quorum. Thank you. We will proceed to our agenda, a copy of which was posted on the for public access to the city's legislative information management system, available at lims.minneapolismn.gov. Is there a motion to approve this agenda?
So moved.
It's moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Any against indicate by saying nay. Any abstentions? That motion passes and the agenda is approved. I believe all the board members have seen a copy of the minutes from the October 12th, 2023 Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
So move. Second.
It's moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
All against indicate by saying nay. Any abstentions if you weren't here? There's one abstention. With that, the motion still passes and the minutes from the Zoning Board of Adjustments October 12th, 2023 meeting are approved. Mr. Ellis is not here, but maybe one of you can address any petitions or communications we may have.
There are no petitions or communications at this time.
Okay, thank you. Reminder to applicants and others, if you're going to speak at the public hearing, please sign in on that sheet over there. You can do so on your way out if you haven't done so already. Also to applicants and others, please contact staff after the hearing with any questions you have regarding your projects. Lastly, if you have something like this, if you could turn it off or turn it on silent, I would appreciate it. Let's review the agenda. I will read the agenda number and the address of the project and state whether it's slated for consent, continuance, withdrawal, return, or discussion. I'll just talk a little bit about what discussion items are. These are items that the board will take public testimony on, deliberate on, and then make a decision. After public testimony has been heard for each particular discussion item, I will close the public hearing for that agenda item. Once I close the public hearing for an item, no additional public testimony will be taken, but staff may be asked to address board questions. After the public hearing for an item is closed, board members will then discuss and act on motions, and the chair only votes in the case of a tie. So let's look at the recommended dispositions of the items that we have today. Agenda item number 5 is 708 13th Avenue Southeast. This is a discussion item. Agenda item number 6 is 3500 West 22nd Street. Staff is recommending this item for consent. Is there anyone here to speak against this item? I see no one. And agenda item number 7 is 5413 Woodlawn Boulevard. This is a discussion item. So let's review the items on the agenda for consent. They're item number 6. Is there a motion to adopt this item on consent?
So move. Second.
It's moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any against indicate by saying nay. Any abstentions? That motion passes. So if you are here for agenda item number 6, your land use request is approved. Good luck with your project. Thanks for coming down. Yep, you're done. You may leave. So with that, we'll move on to our first agenda item where we will have a public hearing, and that's 708 13th Avenue Southeast. Mr. Kohlhaas.
Thank you, Chair Perry and members of the board. This item is a request for a variance to reduce the enclosed storage requirement from 200 square feet to 112 square feet for a new single-family dwelling in the property at 708 13th Avenue Southeast. This property is in the UN2 Urban Neighborhood Zoning District. the Interior 3 Built Form Overlay District, and the University Area Overlay District. This is a survey showing the existing conditions of the property. It has a lot area of 2,572 square feet, and it is irregularly shaped. The main sort of rectangular bulk of the property is about 41 feet in width by 55 feet in depth, and there is that additional triangular extension that goes further back towards the right-hand side of your screen. The principal use and structure on the property is a two-story single-family dwelling, which has a footprint of about 920 square feet. There is no alley access to the subject property, but there is an existing curb cut and driveway on the south side of the house. And that driveway on the subject property is part of an easement agreement with two neighboring properties to the south, with the driveway and the subject property providing access to an off-street parking area on the neighboring property. Staff's understanding is that the applicants for this variance own all of the parcels which are party to this easement agreement, and they were responsible for establishing the agreement in 2018. This is the proposed site plan, and you can also see the main level floor plans on there as well. They're proposing to demolish the existing house and construct a new 2.5-story single-family dwelling. The new house would be similar in footprint, maybe a little bit bigger in terms of the amount of ground it would cover. Similar location on the property, and they are proposing to retain that existing driveway and curb cut and easement on the south side of the house. The main level rear entrance to the house would open to a room which the applicants are showing is used for bike storage primarily, and it would also be used to access the interior of the dwelling as well. This room is 112 square feet in area. The zoning code requires a minimum of 200 square feet of enclosed storage space with any new 1 to 3 unit development. This can be in a detached structure like a garage or a shed, or it can be part of the principal structure as long as it opens directly to the ground level exterior. The applicants are not proposing any other enclosed storage areas satisfying these requirements beyond the 112 square feet in that portion of the principal structure, so they are requesting this variance to reduce that enclosed storage requirement from a minimum of 200 square feet to 112. Staff is recommending denial for this variance, and I'll just go through the staff findings briefly, focusing on the ones that are the reason for that recommendation. For the first required finding about challenges in complying with the ordinance due to circumstances unique to the property, the subject property is relatively small and irregularly shaped compared to many other low-density residential properties in Minneapolis, which are more rectangular and usually closer to 5,000 square feet, so this is just over half the size of a regular parcel. But that said, the buildable area of the property remains sufficient for providing at least 200 square feet of enclosed storage space, even if it's revising the interior layout to expand the storage area within the building bulk is already proposed. Furthermore, the minimum side setbacks are 5 feet each, and they are proposing to be well inside of that, particularly on that south side where they would be 11 feet from the property line. So there is room to expand the principal structure on the property to provide something like additional storage space. And that driveway easement on the south side of the property does take up a lot of buildable space, but as I mentioned before, the applicants for this variance own all the properties that are affected by that easement agreement, and they were the ones to establish the easement in 2018. So this driveway easement is created and maintained by persons presently having an interest in the property, and staff finds it should not be the basis for satisfying this first finding for challenges with complying with the ordinance. Staff finds that finding is not met. The second finding regarding reasonable use of the property, the spirit and intent of the ordinance. The spirit and intent of the ordinance in this case, with this minimum enclosed storage requirement, is to ensure provision of space for storage, primarily property maintenance equipment like lawnmowers and snow shovels, et cetera. And as I mentioned, this can be satisfied through a detached structure like a garage or shed, and like parking space within a garage can count towards that 200 square foot minimum. But the code is also flexible in allowing it as part of the principal structure. This comes from 2021 when the zoning code was amended to eliminate off-street parking requirements citywide. Say, okay, if you're no longer required to provide parking, and most people provided a garage when they were building a new house prior to that point. still wanted to make sure they were providing storage space for property maintenance equipment, even if they weren't going to provide parking space. In this case, applicants are proposing this 112 square feet, which, as you can see on the floor plans, would primarily be used for accessing the building at the rear and also for bike parking. They are required to provide 5 bike parking spaces, in this case, for a new dwelling of this size in that university area overlay district. So they are satisfying a requirement of the zoning code as proposed. But they are not meeting the spirit and intent of the code to provide a minimum amount of space, not just for bike parking, but also for other purposes as well. So staff finds that that is not met. The third required finding for essential character of the locality and potential for injury or detriment to persons or property, staff finds that this is met. It's the house that's proposed is pretty similar to the one that was there before in terms of its size and location on the property, so this would not be a substantial change in that regard. In conclusion, staff recommendation again is for denial based on the findings, based on staff findings I just went over. I will note if the board is inclined to grant this variance request, staff would recommend the standard conditions of approval that they have approval of final plans by city staff, for example, under a building permit application, and they would also need administrative site plan review application, and another condition that they complete construction within 2 years of today's date unless extended by the zoning administrator. There are no public comments received for this item, no written public comments. The applicants and their representative are in attendance today. This concludes my presentation, but I am happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Kohlhaas, for that presentation. Is there any questions of staff? Ms. Grants-Korsch?
Yeah, I'm just curious, this 5-bedroom, 4-bath, has Marcy Homes, or I believe they're the neighborhood that's around it, have they commented on this at all?
Chair Perry, Board Member Grants-Korsch, no, I have not heard from the Marcy Homes Neighborhood Association.
Okay. Can I follow up with a second one?
Sure.
They own the adjacent property, so obviously, does it matter that their management structure might have storage for other things off-site? Obviously, if they own multiple properties, they probably have a snow shovel contract kind of thing. So I'm just curious, does that enter into the discussion at all?
It's something we might think about as staff. We don't have a good enforcement mechanism to say, we can't require that they maintain ownership of all of those properties or that they maintain an agreement with a landscaping company to provide their property maintenance services. Obviously, we expect that may be the case, but we can't require that in an ongoing way.
Thank you.
Mr. Hutchins?
Thanks, Chair Perry. Thanks for your presentation. 2 questions. Can they use like a second outdoor storage to make up the difference that they're short so they can aggregate it together for a shed? Yes. Okay. And then why is there no basement on the property? It looks like a slab on grade. That's a design decision that eats up a lot of the space on the first floor. Design decision?
Chair Perry, Board Member Hutchins, I would defer to the applicants on that decision why they didn't include a basement. I would say for zoning purposes, we would not count space in a basement towards this 200 square foot minimum because it needs to be on the ground floor. The idea is if you're pushing a lawnmower in and out, we don't want someone to have to carry that up and down stairs.
Thank you. I just figure if they have a basement, they can move the utility closet that's eating up the space into the basement, and then that space would be available to meet the code. So thanks.
Any other questions of staff? Yes, Mr. Ingram.
Thank you, Chair Perry, and thank you for the presentation. My question is just about the easement. So with the easement, it would be in perpetuity, correct? And so even if some of the ownership of the other properties changed hands, the easement would remain in place?
Chair Perry, Board Member Ingram, I can't speak from a legal perspective. This is ultimately a private agreement that the city is not involved with. So similar to the question about property maintenance services, we cannot require that they maintain this easement agreement covering all 3 properties. There's nothing to prevent them, there's nothing the city can do to prevent them from signing another document tomorrow that would dissolve this easement agreement or something like that.
Thank you.
Yes.
I forgot to say it was a great presentation. Thank you, Andrew.
Okay, any other questions? I see none. Thank you. Let's open the public hearing. If you could give your name and address for the record, and also, we have read in our packets, we have read the material over. So if you could keep your comments to 10 minutes or less, I would appreciate it.
Yes, I will. My name is William Wells. I am the architect on the project. I'm joined by Tim and Karen Harmson. They are the property owners and owners of Dinkytown Rentals. This is a photo I've got here, if we could put that on the screen, of the existing house on site. The house is currently vacant and has some pretty serious structural issues with the foundation. You can see in the photo it's starting to lean a little bit. The floors are massively uneven, and the house of the foundation is beginning to crumble. So we looked at the feasibility of potentially renovating the house, and we would have to completely rebuild the foundation if we were to do that, try to lift the house, rebuild the foundation, and put the house back down. We'd have to shut down both driveways to do that for an extended period of time. There's some significant safety issues with doing that. It just became technically not feasible. So what we decided to do is to just rebuild the house effectively on the same footprint. And in your packet, you see, there's a diagram that you can see in blue, it shows the new house, and in red, it shows the existing house. So it's almost the same footprint. The new house is almost right on the same footprint as the old house. We've moved the front of the house back a little bit. You can see right there. The new house is moved back a little bit because we want to create a really beautiful front porch in that space. Now, the staff report points out that it suggests that maybe we should just make the house bigger. And zoning staff member Sarah Roman used to be assigned to this project, and she and I worked together and looked at that as an option. And what it did is it triggered other variances. It triggered variances for me to make the house bigger. In any of the 4 directions, it triggered other variances. So the trade was made, do we want to ask for a variance to make the storage room a little bit smaller, or do we want to ask for side yard, front yard, rear yard setbacks? You know, it's a catch, which variance do I want to talk about and ask for, is kind of the position that I'm in. There's this tone in the staff report that we're trying to not comply. That's not true at all. We would love to build a detached shed or detached garage on this site, but as you can see, the lot is a very strange shape, and we've got these established easements to serve these other parcels on the block, and there's just no space on the site without triggering a bunch of variances to build a detached shed. But we're trying to comply. We know what the spirit of the ordinance is. Councilmember Cam Gordon is the one that came forward with this ordinance a couple years ago to try to declutter yards, and he didn't want people storing, lawnmowers and things outside, and bikes and all those things. So we have provided the space to put the bikes inside the house. And the property owners, their office is a block from this site, and they have a 3-car garage where they keep the snow shoveled, and the lawnmower and all that stuff is kept 1 block away from this site to manage the property. So there's not going to be any outdoor storage or clutter. That concern is being addressed by the applicant tonight. As far as making the storage room bigger, you can see if we did that, it's going to take up half the first floor of the house to do that, to make that truly 200 square feet, and it just makes that ground floor kitchen and living room just way too small. It just makes it kind of non-functional. So we're very concerned about that. I did meet with the neighborhood group, Marcy Homes Neighborhood Association. They saw these plans. I met with them. They were very supportive of us rebuilding the house on the same footprint. They were very grateful for maintaining the scale of the house. They're very supportive of this project. Yet they did not say anything negative about this project. They've only said positive things to me about it. They like the front porch. So I've gotten positive feedback from the neighborhood association. If are there any other questions for me? I think the property owner might want to say something about this easement.
Mr. Hutchins?
Thanks, Chair Perry. Thanks for coming down. Basement? Design
Oh.
consideration, cost consideration?
You know, it's a technical issue about shoring, because there's cars going on both sides of the house, there's driveways on both sides. We would have to probably shut down both driveways and build significant shoring, to build a basement on this site. I think it's just kind of technically not feasible to do that because of how small the site is. So that's mainly the reason why, because it's just the cars are so close to the house.
Okay, thanks.
Ms. Grants Korsch? Nope. Anyone else? Mr. Wells, do you have any idea why the neighborhood association, Marcy Homes is pretty good about sending in letters of support or denial. So do you have any idea why did you meet with them recently?
We met with them when, at the same time that there was sort of a crisis happening in Dinkytown where the identity apartments, if you remember that, all the students couldn't move in. They were very distracted by that crisis that has been going on in their neighborhood. And, you know, they went down to the legislature and they testified. It was a very big deal. They have been spending their time on that project. And I think this small project just kind of got pushed to the side to deal with that issue.
Okay, thanks. Would anyone else like to speak in favor of this application?
I do, I didn't sign in, but my name is, I better go.
Yeah, if you could give your name and address.
Sure.
And no need to repeat anything that's already been said already.
Oh, okay. My name is Tim Harmson. My wife and I own Dinkytown Rentals. The property, there wasn't a picture of the property, but the current property is a very rough shape. It's really beyond its shelf life. And this is an effort to improve that corner. There's a new properties all around there, and this one sticks out like a sore thumb. Reducing the bike shed or the bike area from 200 square feet to 112 doesn't seem like a great hardship, and it would allow us to proceed with this project. And I think that the area really is improving fast, and it's looking awesome, and this would take an eyesore off of that street. We do have a very large maintenance center or facility about 2 blocks away on 6th Street, where we keep all the working stuff. So anyways, well, that would be it. Thank you.
I have a question for you. What if you sell the property? What happens to this off-site storage area then?
If we sell the property,
Yeah,
they would use the storage shed, the 112 feet inside, to put a lawnmower or bicycles.
which doesn't quite meet code.
It doesn't, but it's a pretty large area,
Right, I'm just pointing out that it doesn't meet code.
you know.
So that's probably one of the things that we have to think about.
Yeah,
Because the variances go with the land, they don't go with the property owner. Which probably makes sense to you.
I guess, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time, and
Yep, thanks for coming down.
thank you.
Anyone else like to speak in favor of the application? I see no one. Anyone like to speak against it? I see no one. Let's close the public hearing. Board comment? Anyone? Mr. Hutchins?
Thanks, Chair Perry. I think staff got it right. I think it's too small. It's a brand-new building. Design choices were made. I would move staff findings.
Is that a motion?
Yes.
It's moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Board Member Grants Korsch.
Yes.
Hutchins.
Yes.
Ingram.
Yes.
Smekarova. Aye. That's 4 yeas and 0 nays.
So that motion passes. Your request is denied. You can talk to staff about what your options are going forward. And you'll have to wait because we need Mr. Kohlhaas for the next item. Thanks for coming down. All right, this is item number 7. And 5413 Woodlawn Boulevard. Mr. Kohlhaas.
Thank you, Chair Perry and members of the board. This item is a request for variances to reduce the minimum required front and interior side yard setbacks for construction of a new single-family dwelling on an existing foundation at 5413 Woodlawn Boulevard. This property is in the UN1 Urban Neighborhood Zoning District, the Interior 1 Built Form Overlay District, the Shoreland Overlay District, and the Airport Overlay District. This is a survey and site plan showing the previous conditions of the property. Has a lot area of 8,207 square feet. It's just under 50 feet in width, and it has frontage on Woodlawn Boulevard, which is to the northwest. So that's towards the left on the site plan here. And the front of the property also faces Lake Nokomis and the parkway in that same direction. This photo is provided by the applicants. It shows a one-story single-family dwelling as the principal use and structure on the property. They have other existing site improvements like a detached garage accessed by the alley to the rear. This house was substantially damaged by a fire in September of 2022 and was completely removed with the foundation remaining, and I believe the main level floor trusses remaining as well. On the site plan, you can see the established front setback, for the house is 50.6 feet. This is non-conforming to their minimum required front yard, which is effectively 52 feet at the relevant portion, based on the line drawn between the fronts of the neighboring houses. The established side setback is 4.2 feet on the northeast side, which is towards the top. The minimum side setback is 5 feet, so the old house was also non-conforming to that, in addition to the front. The proposal is to construct a 2-story single-family dwelling. This would largely have the same footprint as the previous house on the property. And again, they are proposing to use that existing foundation and essentially match the footprint for that. But the design would be changing in some ways, including a new second story above the first story, replacing the previous house. And they are also proposing changes to the main level exterior window and door layouts. The front door would be in a new location, different window arrangements, particularly on the front, which is also relevant in this case. And here's just some floor plans showing the main level and upper level as proposed. Again, the variance requests are to reduce those to non-conforming setbacks, the front and the interior side on the northeast. The staff recommendation is for denial for both of these variance requests. The staff findings are substantially identical for each setback variance. I'll go through them together and again focus on the findings that staff finds are not met. The first required finding for challenges in complying with the ordinance due to circumstances unique to the property, staff finds that this is not met. The zoning code allows an in-kind replacement of a non-conforming structure without the need for a variance, and it would allow some level of alteration to an existing structure to a non-conforming structure when you are replacing it, but there is a limitation on how many changes you can make to the design of something before it is treated as new construction for zoning code purposes and non-conforming rights are lost. So the need for variances in this case is effectively created by the proposal to add a second story and the changes to the main level exterior windows and doors, which are what factors into the zoning code requirements about changes to existing structures and non-conforming structures. So these challenges in complying with the setback requirements are really due to the changes of the building bulk and the facade, and these are the result of design decisions made by the applicants, and staff does not find something unique about the property that creates a challenge in complying with the code. For the second required finding regarding reasonable use of the property in spirit and intent of the code, the spirit and intent for setback requirements generally are to promote the orderly development and use of land, to minimize conflicts among land uses and ensure separation of uses, to provide adequate light, air, and open space, to reinforce existing development patterns, and for front yards in particular, it's intended to have uniform front yards across residential block faces and to preserve views up and down streets. For nonconformities, the code is intended to control the continued existence of legal nonconforming uses and structures, but the code is also intended to bring about their gradual elimination, of nonconformities. The code is intended to regulate the enlargement or intensification, expansion or reconstruction of nonconforming uses and structures, but also intended to restrict their reestablishment after destruction. As I mentioned before, the zoning code allows for in-kind replacement of a nonconforming structure with some limited changes that would be permitted. The proposal in this case exceeds those standards in the code that are intended to provide those thresholds for when it needs to comply with current zoning code requirements. So staff finds that finding is also not met. The third finding regarding essential character of the locality and potential for injury or detriment, staff finds that is met, and there are also 3 findings specific to the shoreline overlay district. Staff finds that all of those are met. I can go through those in more detail if the board is interested, but in the interest of time, I will conclude again that the staff recommendation is for denial of these 2 variances based on the findings that I mentioned. One thing I do want to clarify before finishing, there's a part of the staff report that talks about city council statements about the use of an existing foundation for setback variances for new construction and findings for practical difficulty. I just want to clarify that a little bit and say that has come from, I think, similar proposals in the past that members of the board might remember situations somewhat like this one, although obviously the details may be different, and in this case we are dealing with fire damage, which is certainly a little bit different than when we often see this. But for similar proposals in the past, including ones that have been appealed and gone to the BIZ committee or previously the zoning and planning committee of the city council, typically the location of an existing foundation should not be considered the sole basis for finding practical difficulties, but I will clarify that it can be considered, particularly in conjunction with other factors which the board may identify for satisfying required findings. In the staff report, I think that was mentioned under the first finding, the challenges finding, but this could also relate to other findings, like the second one, which talks about the spirit and intent of the code. So just wanted to clear that up a little bit. And similar to the last item, I will note if the board is inclined to grant either of these variances, staff would recommend a few standard conditions of approval. One, that they receive approval of final plans from city staff, for example, building permits and administrative site plan review, that they complete construction within 2 years of today's date unless extended by the zoning administrator, and as with all proposals in the shoreline overlay district, that they submit and follow an erosion control plan, meaning best management practices. I think there were a total of 7 public comments received, 7 written comments, most of which were attached to the staff report when it was published, and others which should have been forwarded along separately for your consideration. All of the public comments that I received were in favor of the applicant's requests in this case. The applicants and their representative are in attendance during today's hearing. This concludes my presentation, but I will stand for questions.
Yep. Thanks, Mr. Kohlhaas, for your presentation. Questions? Mr. Hutchins.
Thanks, Chair Perry. Thanks for your presentation. How'd they build a 2-story building without a building permit and site plan review?
Chair Perry, Board Member Hutchins, I might defer to the applicant on filling in some of the context about those events.
How about this? If they would have gone forth and gotten a building permit and site plan review, would this been identified before they built the 2-story structure that exists
Yes.
today? Okay.
Yes.
It's a very interesting tidbit about city council being included. I'm not sure I've ever seen a comment from city council or an assessment of city council's responses in the report before. So that's just very interesting. Do you think that will continue, that they'll have some analysis be included in some similar cases?
Chair Perry, Board Member Smikarova, I think that was intended as kind of supporting context and maybe not articulated as clearly as would have been beneficial. Again, in the context that in the absence of other factors which staff would find to satisfy that finding, speaking for staff, we have not found the presence of an existing foundation to be on its own sufficient for satisfying that finding. And it's our understanding that that has been the position of the city council in times when that has come to their, specifically to their attention, for example, an appeal on which they're making a decision. We weren't able to identify specific instances of that, unfortunately. We were talking with the applicants and their representatives about this week. So I wish we would have been able to find some more documentation to support that, but again, it was sort of intended in support of the remainder of staff's response, being that we don't see other findings.
So I'll just mention, since I've been on the board for a while, this is something that has evolved over time. The city council used to take that into consideration, and then it changed, so it is not something that is taken into consideration now
Okay.
as a primary reason. And so I think it makes sense to have that in the report because we haven't dealt with one of these in a while. Yes, Mr. Ellis?
Chair Perry, board member Smikarova. This dates back to about 2014 when there was a major change, another amendment to how we regulate, at the time, 1 to 4 family dwelling units, and some substantial changes to our code at the time. Prior to that, we were recommending approval, and they were being approved by the Board of Adjustment. And I have several examples of that to Mr. Kohlhaas's point. We did try to find the specific hearing. I wasn't able to find that, unfortunately. But there were a series of them in 2014, and then right at the beginning of 2015. So somewhere around that time, council directed us to, basically, like, it wasn't a formal written direction, but it was a verbal response upon appeal or at a zoning and planning committee hearing, where they directed us and said, one of the intent of the ordinances and the changes that were made in 2014 were to address major remodels where it's a tear down essentially, but they weren't replacing the foundation. And council at that time wanted, if somebody's going to go that far, they might as well just comply with all current standards. And so, since that point, we haven't seen too many applications before the board. Some have been approved, but there were other practical difficulties that were found. Well, to use the term, currently it's a challenge. At the time, it was a practical difficulty. There was one example where there was a 29-foot wide lot, and that was where the condition, so that's where that rested. Another example where it was in 2017, where it was denied, and they had to make modifications to the foundation and the construction. So.
Thank you.
Are there other questions of staff? Ms. Grants-Korsch?
Thank you. It was very thorough. But I'm still getting kind of lost in some of the numbers, so I just want to clarify. I understand that 10 inches. I'm still looking for the 50.6 is where they are right now. Is that correct?
Yeah, this is the old survey, or old, showing the previous conditions of the property, which is largely similar to what is proposed, since they would be reusing the foundation. And you can see it calls out an existing front setback of 50.6 feet. That's from the front property line to the front of the foundation wall. And that's what they're proposing to match by building the new house on the existing foundation. The minimum front setback in this case is determined by the line drawn between the fronts of the neighboring houses, and you can see that dashed line drawn across here, and that is not exactly parallel to the front property line, so it is a little bit of a range. When you look at that, not the very southernmost front corner, but sort of that where they have the 1.4 foot dimension, that's just where the gap is the biggest. So I think that's where in the staff report it mentions a front setback requirement of 52 feet.
Right, and that's where you got the 1.4. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Any other questions? I see none. Thanks. Let's open the public hearing. Is the applicant or the representative present? Sure. And as I said before, if you could, we've read your written testimony, which was pretty thorough. So if you could highlight that and keep your comments to 10 minutes, that would be great.
Will do for sure.
Thanks.
Thank you. And Mr. Hutchins, it was a really good question. I will make sure to answer that in my comments here. And I'll speak for just a minute here and then turn it over to our attorney who will go into some more detail. But first of all, my name is Pat Skane. My wife, Lana, and I own the home at 5413 Woodlawn Boulevard. We love Minneapolis. We were both raised in Minneapolis. This house has been in her family for a long time, 44 years. Her parents purchased the house. Last summer, her mother went into a nursing home or into memory care, and so we purchased the house shortly after there was a fire. And it has always been our intent, and still is, to sell the home to our daughter, Christina. So shortly after the fire, we thought it was a good idea to expand the size of the house by adding a second floor. And clearly, ignorance is no excuse, but when I applied for that permit, I had no idea that adding a second floor would then require a survey, and therefore then that survey would reveal the variances that bring us here today, that we were, because of the setbacks. So at the time of application, I incorrectly assumed that since we were building on the existing foundation, that getting the permit was just a formality. Again, clearly my error. Further, I incorrectly assumed that the permit was more for inspection purpose, not to be able to start work. Again, clearly my error. But I never for a second had any intention of circumventing the permitting process, and I submitted the permit application long before we started doing any work. So although I submitted the original application on November 17th, and in that saying that we wanted to add a second story, it wasn't until March 30th that I learned for the first time that there was a connection between adding that second story and an issue with the setbacks. And that's when we were informed by city staff, Alex, that variances would be required. So if we had known earlier, we for sure would have made different decisions. But we are where we are today. And as you know, our neighbors strongly support us getting granted the variances and really don't want the disruption caused by the construction that would occur if we have to move the foundation slightly to comply, as well as the impact to 2 large trees that are on the property. And I guess in summary, since we are talking about a matter of inches, it seems like a waste of time and resources, and really especially an unfair burden to our neighbors to be required now to change the location of the foundation and not be allowed to build on the existing foundation. So again, my hope and request is that you would approve the variances.
Thanks for your testimony. Questions? Mr. Hutchins?
Thanks, Chair Perry. Thanks for coming down. So I just want to be clear. Fire happened September 22?
Correct.
When did you start work on the rebuild?
When you say, so we didn't start building, so it was tear out, so we started fairly soon after that. We hired a restoration company. We didn't start any new construction, till the middle of February. It was February 13th, 14th, something like that, was the date that any new construction started.
Of what year?
Of 23.
And then when did the city say, hey, you've gone too far without a permit?
Shortly after that, we had an inspector stop by and say that, basically asking for the permit, which wasn't there. And he said, you guys, and I wasn't there, the framers were there, and he told them to stop, which they did. He then did allow them, he allowed them to finish the roof, to put the roof on, to cover it. And that's where it stopped then. That was in February
And then when did you said you submitted your permit in November of 22?
of '22, correct, November 17th. On the 18th, we were given a reference in project docs that clearly directly showed, I think even in the heading, said adding second floor and fire. Actually, in my summary here, it says description of work, and I wrote adding second level and rebuilding from fire damage. So this is November 17th. The next day, November 18th, we got a response. And then partly they said that I needed a whole lot more information. I needed to provide drawings and all of that. That was then all submitted in early January, all of the drawings and elevations and those kind of things. And there was no mention of a survey. So it wasn't until later then that then there was a request for the survey.
Did you hire a contractor for all this work, or did you do it yourself?
Myself. So I was like the general, clearly, yep. Clearly
Okay,
an
thanks.
error.
Any other questions? I see none. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair Perry. My name is Mark Theroff. I'm an attorney and I represent the Scan family. I want to start with just 3 facts before I address the staff report. 3 key facts that I think sort of frame the issues. Mr. Kohlhaas explained the distances of the variances, 10 inches on the side, and I think we're between 4 and 23 inches on the front. But it may not have been immediately apparent to you from the staff report that the existing foundation is situated almost perfectly halfway between the 2 houses on either side. It's 9.8 feet on the one side and 10.3 feet on the other side. So it's not offset. There aren't big distances on one side and small distances on the other. Second, I think it's important to underscore at the beginning that the purpose of this variable front yard setback line is to protect the adjoining properties, to protect their views and to protect their privacy. Here, the neighbors on both sides are very much in favor of keeping the structure that's there now and not changing it, and they support the variance. So the people we're here to try to protect with this ordinance are supportive of the variances that are being requested. Finally, I want to mention about the changes to the building. There was a lot in the staff report about changes to the building, design changes, and so forth. So I think it's very important to underscore that other than the 2 setbacks, this proposed house is fully compliant in all ways with the zoning ordinance. There are no other issues in terms of windows and doors and all the other things that are discussed in the staff report. Those were merely triggers for the need for a different level of a review of the project as, between a remodel and new construction. They have nothing to do with the variances. So as to the findings, I want to talk about the first and the second findings, and I'm going to talk about them in reverse order. As for the second required finding, the staff find that it's consistent with the purposes of the 2040 plan, and we, of course, agree with that. But as for the consistency with the spirit and intent of the zoning ordinance, staff have recommended against making that finding, but the analysis in the staff report isn't actually consistent with what's required under the zoning ordinance. According to section 525-500, I know I don't need to tell you this, that's the statute or the ordinance you use every day. What's supposed to be considered is whether the proposed use of the property is reasonable and in keeping with the spirit and intent of the ordinance. And the proposed use here is a single-family dwelling in the urban neighborhood district. It's clearly a reasonable use, and in keeping with the spirit and intent of the ordinance, because it's a permitted use. It's what that zone is designed for. The approach that the staff report takes is to apply that analysis not to the use that's proposed, but to the proposed variances. The analysis in the question that's asked is whether the proposed variances are in the spirit and in keeping with the intent of the ordinance. And you just don't need to do anything more than look at the ordinance and see that that's not the right standard. That's not what 525-500 says. In fact, we didn't get to hear the report on the 22nd Street project that was on the agenda slightly before us, but I took a peek at the staff report for that one, and that one does apply the correct standard. The proposed finding in that one is that the proposed development is a reasonable use of the property and is in keeping with the spirit and intent of the ordinance. The staff report in that one doesn't consider whether the proposed variances are consistent. It's the proposed use, and that's the correct approach. It's also worth noting that in the half of that finding relating to the comp plan, relating to the 2040 plan, the staff report got it right. The staff report says that the proposed use is consistent with the Minneapolis 2040 plan and doesn't talk about whether the variances are consistent. So under the correct analysis being, is the proposed use consistent with the spirit and intent of the ordinance? That answer is clearly yes. It's a single-family dwelling in the urban neighborhood district. So that brings me to the unique challenges. The first finding that you need to make, we have identified unique challenges that stem from 3 circumstances relating to this property, one of which is the existence of the fully built and fully functional foundation on the property and the basement. But that's not the only one. Other unique circumstances of this property are the presence of 2 homes within 10 feet on either side, which will experience quite a bit of disruption and discomfort if the house has to be lifted and the existing foundation demolished and hauled away and concrete trucks brought in to pour a new foundation. That's going to create a lot of disturbance for the adjoining property. The third unique challenge relates to the canopy trees. In your packet, you'll see we've offered an opinion from an arborist who has opined that replacement of the foundation of this property could threaten the survival of those 2 large canopy trees, which provide shade for both this property and the neighboring property. The staff report doesn't even acknowledge those issues, let alone address them. Instead, it says that you should find there are no unique challenges because the variances wouldn't be necessary if the Scans had rebuilt the exact same house on the property. That's not the test. That ignores the fact that I would reckon that a majority, if not a large majority, of the variances that you make decisions on at each of your meetings involve cases where people could have made different design decisions and could have avoided the need for a variance by modifying their project. Could have been a significant modification, but a modification of some type would have obviated the need for the variance. In fact, just last month, you had the variance request at 2201 Lake of the Isles Parkway, which was recommended for approval by staff and that this body approved. In that case, the applicant wanted to build an addition to a house that was non-conforming as to setbacks. They wanted to connect the garage to the house through an addition. The garage was also non-conforming as to setbacks. So just as in this case, you had a proposed expansion of a non-conforming structure, and no one suggested in that case that the unique challenges prong could not be satisfied because the need for the variances was due to the design choices of the property owner. So the issue really is whether there are unique challenges in complying with this ordinance due to unique circumstances on the property, and we've identified 3 of those for you. My last comment will be really brief. This issue about the city council position, if you will, on this issue, I was very surprised to get the staff report and see that reference in there. Followed up with staff, both Mr. Kohlhaas and Mr. Ellis. I felt that if some sort of guidance from the city council was being used to try to recommend that our application be denied, that we be afforded an opportunity to know what that guidance consisted of, maybe see the documents, see the cases in which that guidance was supposedly given. I had a hard time even imagining what that could be because the city council doesn't make findings in cases like this, even on appeal. They just vote up or down, and really wanted to understand what that was about. And I was told nothing could be found. So the compromise, if you will, was that Mr. Kohlhaas would modify what he said in his staff report and tell you that the understood guidance, if you will, from council was that the existence of a foundation of the property by itself should not be deemed a unique circumstance to justify a variance. And here we have, of course, identified several others beyond just the foundation. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your testimony. Thanks for finishing up early. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in favor of the application? Sure. If you could give your name and address for the record, please.
Yeah, my name is Amber Yunan, and my address is adjacent to their property, 5417 Woodlawn Boulevard. And I understand you've read the letter that all of the neighbors have submitted, so mine included.
Yep.
But I just wanted to speak to the second finding that we were talking about today, the kind of spirit of views and allowing neighbors to have experiences that aren't impeded by a new construction. And myself and my partner and the other adjacent neighbors and every neighbor that we've talked to is in support of this. So that isn't a problem in this case. We've all known the family for years. Joan had lived there before, and it really is the same intent that Christina's going to move in there, and we're all looking to kind of support this and move it forward and get on with our lives together. And our yards are enormous in this part of Minneapolis, so it's not like it's on a tiny lot where 10 inches and a foot have a really strong impact. We have lots of open area in the front and the back of each property.
All right. Thanks for coming down, giving testimony. Anyone else like to speak in favor of this application? I see no one. Anyone speak against it? I see no one. Let's close the public hearing. Board comment? Mr. Hutchins?
Thanks, Chair Perry. I find it hard to support findings for this when there's no permit on the front end that would have identified the issues. The attorney for the applicant said that there's, I don't want to say it, no attorney, if they'd have been talked to on the front end, would have ever said, go ahead and start building without a permit. There's just no way around it. And then some of the comments, all the neighbors support it. You wouldn't have needed neighbor support if you'd have got a permit on the front end and identified all the issues. I have a hard time approving something that went that far and didn't get approval on the front end. So.
Thanks for those comments, Mr. Hutchins. Ms. Grants-Korsch.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time with this only because if you had come to us beforehand, before it had all started, I think it would have been a reasonable assessment because I disagree, I guess, that the fully acceptable foundation to me, to rip it off and move it in 10 inches or 1.5 feet, to me is a sustainability tragedy. We don't try to do that. We don't try to rip out things when the impact is not going to be that significant. I do appreciate the fact the 9.8 and the 10.3 separation, and I do understand that. So I guess I'm just going to ask the other commissioners who have done this before, are we penalizing them because they did the wrong thing and build it without it being looked at? Are we penalizing them? If they had come to us beforehand, would we have accepted it? Because it's a reasonable assessment that you want to reuse an existing basement. I think that's a reasonable assessment, and it does create a unique situation. because I don't want to see extra stuff going to landfill. So I guess I'm asking my other people up here to tell me the difference between prior and after.
Well, I can speak to some of that. The question of process and whether the right process was followed, whether that's the city process or the process by the applicants, really shouldn't come into play in our decision-making. That's not part of the legal findings. You won't see that in the legal findings. So I don't know if that answers the question. And so people can argue with you about whether the city council's sort of tendency to not approve things that didn't make the basements move. They can disagree with you on that, but as far as the process is concerned, that's not really part of our decision-making. Yeah.
If denied today and they trimmed the front of the house back to sit inside the setback and trim the north side of the house back a foot, would that trigger any other variance requests needed?
Chair Perry, Board Member Hutchins, no variances would be required if they were to do that, but as staff, we don't presume that they can.
Yep.
That would mean removing the entire foundation, altering the grading, excavation and filling, and a lot that goes into that. It's essentially the same as building it in any other location on the property. So we don't presume it's that simple.
Sure, thanks.
Other comments? Yes.
I'd like to move staff findings. I think that they did a great assessment and not all the findings can be met, and I don't think that the variances should be approved as requested.
That's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
It's moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Board Member Grants Korsch.
I can't, sorry.
Hutchins.
Is that a no?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hutchins.
Yes.
Ingram.
Aye.
Smikarova.
Aye.
That's 3 yeas and 1 nay.
Okay, so the requests are denied. You can talk to staff and see what your options are going forward. Thanks for coming down, everyone. Appreciate it. All right. There was some talk that we would, on new business, or rather old business, have a calendar, but I don't see that in any of our packet material, so I think that is.
Chair Perry, members of the board, I have dates, and then we don't have the specific calendar, so usually we go one cycle and then can adopt it at the next one, and we'll have a formal calendar for you. But I'll give the dates to the board today to consider, and we will email something to you all in the interim, which will then be available at the next public hearing for public viewing as well. The proposed dates, based on the tentative council calendar for next year, are January 4th, January 18th, February 1st, February 15th, and February 29th. An odd timing for a leap year. This is about the only way it could possibly come up to get 3 hearings within a February, but that's how it timed out this year.
Okay.
What's the date for?
2/29.
No, what are you talking about dates for?
Oh, this is for next year's calendar?
Oh, yes. Chair Perry, Board Member Smikarova, we won't have a full council calendar until the council meets and can decide how they're going to handle council committees, what they're going to be doing. But we wanted to get ahead of the game and at least have the January and February meetings set for the Board of Adjustment, Heritage Preservation Commission, and City Planning Commission. I believe it was 4 years ago we ran into, or maybe it was even it's been a little bit longer than, I guess, the last election cycle, where they made some substantial changes to it, and the board was operating without a calendar for a while, and it was very difficult to operate without that certainty, and so we
Yeah,
just wanted
and this happens because we're having a council election. So we have a new council coming in for next year, and they could come up with new committees, and they will establish dates for those meetings, and our dates are triggered by their dates.
Yes. I mean, Chair Perry, Board Member Smikarova, in the past, there used to be more council committees. We reported up through the Zoning and Planning Committee, so appeals went to the Zoning and Planning Committee. As a result of COVID, council restructured and only have 2 committees currently, POGO, which I forget what its acronym means, and then BIZ, which is the Business Inspection, Housing, and Zoning Committee that our appeals go to now. It's entirely possible that they may break out into additional committees again, maybe reconstitute a Zoning and Planning Committee, we don't know. We're making some, kind of assumptions with this based on the time of the presumed council dates, the actual thing, and then we'll go from there. There may be additional changes as we go throughout the year, but we at least wanted to get something adopted for January, February, so we can operate with some certainty for, especially as it relates to our land use applications and the 60-120 requirements from state law.
So, as I understand it, you'll mail those out, and then we can consider them we can vote on them as part of old business at our next meeting.
Yes.
Great.
Chair Perry, if it's all right, I was just planning on emailing them, but if anyone would like a physical copy of the draft, this is just a draft at this point.
No.
I can arrange that.
Emailing is quite fine. Yep. So is there any other old business or new business? Our next meeting is November 9th, and hopefully we will not be down to 5 people. We'll have some more people joining us. Some of our colleagues will be able to make it. Life will not be getting in the way of meetings. And so with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
It's moved and second. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. We are adjourned.